Hi and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to talk about metering, and I'm going to introduce you to various different metering methods and the dreaded zone system that freaks so many people out. That isn't that scary really. Let's get into it. If you look around the internet at most of the people who are using large format cameras like my lovely old MPP here, you will see that most are using some form of spot meter for metering. Now, this can be a bit of a barrier to people getting into large format and indeed medium format, or any area where exposure, it needs to be critical or it needs to be under control for creative processes. So I'm going to take you through how spot meters are used, why spot meters are used, and how they fit into the rather scary Ansel Adams inspired zone system. Okay, so first of all, why do we use a spot meter for a lot of large format work instead of a reflected light meter like this Western meter here, or a reflected light meter with an incident light cone like the Western meter again? Well, largely the reason is because we have the luxury in large format of being able to develop each sheet of film separately. So if we want to adjust the contrast range of a sheet of film, we have the ability to do that in development because we do it individually. So we're using every bit of latitude and goodness the film has in it creatively and under control. But we need a system, we need some discipline in order to get that all working. And the zone system is just simply a discipline to get predictable results. When you look at a scene, when you analyse the scene, and you can visualise in your mind what the print will look like, because you will know where the various tones within the scene will fall on the print. It's not as complex as it looks. Let's start with middle grey. Middle grey may be a bit boring. For reference, it's somewhere near the colour of this cloth on the table. It may be boring, but it's actually really important to photographers. All exposure meters, and I'm going to count the one that's in this Olympus OM2, Western meter, my Goss and Spot meter, they all average down the scene in front of them to 18% grey. Now, with some camera meters there's some intelligent programming and logic going in the way that it does it, and the patterns vary slightly. But essentially everything is being boiled down to 18% grey. Now, the problem that exists with that is that not every scene will have a subject that is 18% grey. And there'd be a whole range of tones from pure black to pure white, as in no detail in it at all. And what if your subject falls more towards one end or the other of that spectrum? Then that exposure from 18% grey isn't going to be right. You will either blow the highlights out of your film, because most film has, I think, around a 7-stop range, black and white film, that it can hold detail in the highlights to detail in the shadows. The problem is when the scene exceeds that range, then either your shadow areas that you want to see detail in are going to be absolutely jet black and clogged up, or the highlights are going to have no detail at all and are all going to be blown out. Now, controlling the highlights and the shadows, that's essentially what the zone system's about. The zone system uses a series of numbers from 0 to 10. 0 being absolutely pure black within the scene with no detail in it at all, to 10 being absolutely pure white, in other words, just the base colour of the film, just no detail in the highlights at all. And neutral grey, 18% grey, is right in the middle of that scale, and it's zone 5. So when we take a reading with a normal reflected light meter of a scene, that exposure will be correct for anything that is middle grey or zone 5. Okay, got that? Now, there's something cunning that we can do here. We can look at the other tones in the picture, and we can place those on that scale of 0 to 10 so that we get the optimum range of tones within the print, and we can fall still within the range of contrast that the film can actually reproduce without blowing out the highlights or clogging up the blacks. So, and of course we can do that by working away at the development stage, either shortening or lengthening the development. I'll get on to that in a while. But first of all, the thing we need to do is to determine what we want detail in a picture. And before we think about any of the numbers or anything of that with the sort, with the zone system, we really have to think, where do we want the detail? And the first thing to think is, where do we want the shadow detail? What shadow areas is it acceptable to have go completely black? What areas do we want some detail in? So normally, with a spot meter, when we're starting to take zone readings, we'll start by metering for a shadow area, the darkest shadow area that we want to see detail in. Now, I'm going to show you a shot that I took yesterday, and I'll show you where on that scene I metered from. First of all, I should say that the day was actually quite bright but misty, so it was actually very flat lighting, and that actually helped me out on this one. But seen in front of me, lovely old boat, and I decided to take a shadow reading from the bit you can see here under the hull, and that would have some detail in it, and I'd equate that to zone 3 on the zone scale, which is the dark tones that still have detail in them. I then took a meter reading from a highlight area, which was actually an area of mud in the middle distance, which reflected out as nearly white with some detailing, and I placed that at zone 8. Now my Gaussian meter will actually work on the zone system and allowed me to take my shadow reading and nudge that to the left on the scale, so to speak, so that that 18% grey reading, which is zone 5, became that dark grey. What you're going to do is you're going to meter. Now, I'll show you a way that you can do this without zone 3 shadow area that does it automatically for you, like close down by 2 stops, because there's 2 stops between zone 3 and zone 5. Then that will have placed your shadow exactly where you want it. Now, in the instance that I'm giving here, there was actually a short enough contrast range that I didn't have to worry about the top end blowing out, because there are about 6 or 7 stops available, and I was coming in at zone 8, so there was plenty of room. Now, if you don't want to do all of this calculation and messing about, you can use this, something that I actually downloaded and printed out and assembled the other day from Stearman Press. It's a free download, and you can print it and stick it on card, and it's a zone calculator. Essentially this does what the Gaussian meter does, but just by moving arrows around. You will take a reading and set the aperture. You always have to leave the shutter speed the same when you calculate with this. You also take a look, I will give a link to the Stearman Press site. They've got a good explanation of how to use this calculator there. You dial in your exposure on one dial in f-stops. You then move that round to zone 3. You take a highlight reading, dial that in, and it will tell you on here whether your contrast range is exceeded, and if so, it'll tell you whether you need to push or pull development. Pushing means adding a little bit of extra time to development, which boosts the contrast. Pulling means removing the film from the developer a little early and reducing the contrast. This, as I say, is the beauty of large format, because you can do this because we're dealing with individual sheets of film. Well, I hope this has been a bit of a help. It is a very broad topic and there's lots more in it, and I'll be trying to do a second part of this to try and make things a bit clearer as to how this applies to colour and how it would apply to digital if you were going to use it with that. But I hope for now that this has helped a bit. If not, please do let me know in the comments, and I'll try and redo this and try and get this over to you as clearly as I can, because it is a stumbling point that some people find with a large format photography, getting the zone system sorted out. Of course, you don't have to use the zone system. You could use an incident light meter, which is very, very accurate, but you'd still need a little bit of savvy with that as to how you were going to interpret the readings to give you the complete control. And I thoroughly recommend that you read Ansel Adams' 3 books the camera, the negative and the print. It's quite advanced stuff, but it does contain everything within the Zone system in there. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, do hit the like button and ring the bell. And if you fancy seeing some more, then think about subscribing. Anyway, you take care of yourselves, and till I see you all again, bye.